Hello, and welcome to Talking Treatment, the podcast for everything in the field of mental health and addiction treatment. Join us in listening to our episode as we will focus on highlighting industry trends with guest experts and healthcare providers from around the nation in the treatment industry who will share their unique perspectives on treatment. Ending the stigma on behavioral health and substance use disorders is very important to us, and the easiest way to do that is by talking about it. That's Talking Treatment. Today, our guest speakers are Bill Robbins, Executive Director of the Little Hill Foundation in New Jersey, and CEO and founder of AZZLY, Coletta Dorado.
Thank you, Ryan. Hi, Bill.
Hi, Coletta.
Thank you for joining us today. We're very excited to hear more about the Little Hill Foundation and your fabulous programs, both Alina Lodge as well as Haley House, the transitional halfway house for women, both based in beautiful Blairstown, New Jersey. I did have the opportunity to visit your location, and what a great campus you have, and I really salute you for that. And congratulations on this executive directorship position. How's it going?
Thank you. I appreciate it. It's been a wonderful year. I just finished my first year up in January, and it's been just a wonderful opportunity. I was with Alina for just almost 8 years now, and I was on our men's clinical team, but it's been really rewarding to move into the executive director position and follow Michael Hordenstein, my predecessor, who just did a wonderful job here. And we've had some just exciting, it's been an exciting year, and a year of really self-reflection. And if for those listeners familiar with 12-step language, we really have undergone an organizational fourth step in looking at ourselves and what we're doing well and what's really working and what's helping our students and their families recover. And then, in a very honest manner, looking at ways that we can get better and some of our weaknesses. So it's been exciting, and I think we're excited as the next year comes along with some of our programming changes and additions, etc.
That's great. And Bill, the fact that you're an LCSW and moving into the executive director position, do you find others in the same position have that clinical background, or are you unique?
It's a good question, Coletta. I think that I'm a bit more unique to the executive director position in coming up the clinical side. Certainly, there are those out there that have followed a similar path. Listen, there's everything. There's the pros and cons to all of us, and I think then one of my strengths is understanding the clinical work and how that guides our treatment of our students and such. And then on the other side, I don't have an MBA. I'm not coming from a business side, so like a lot of good leaders, I put people around me that are really, really strong. We have a wonderful board of directors that are not only supportive of our mission, but can really support me in some of the business aspects of running a foundation and our two entities. So I think it is a bit unique, and to be honest, I really, in some ways, I'm really lucky, and I think appreciative of the understanding of what's going on the clinical side.
Yeah, Bill, I will compliment you, because when we came up to spend time with your staff and talk about technology and electronic health records and billing and everything that's the changes that are happening in healthcare, it was very impressive, the clinical aspect, and you're really engaging your staff. And this is behavioral health, this is addiction treatment. It is all clinical, it is all therapy. You are working with your medical team, your nurses, and your medical director, and doing the right thing. And I think what you brought to the table was that desire to make your staff happy, getting their buy-in to use technology so that you could really support better outcomes and potentially grow the residential program for Alina Lodge. So I was very impressed, because your hands-on approach and your concern that your clinical team would like the technology that you were presenting or offering to them, and allowing them to vet the technology, I thought was great.
Well, I appreciate the compliment. I think, and I appreciate your observations. One of the things that we are certainly incorporating more is technology and using data to drive some of the interventions and some of the changes that I think we're making as we speak, and some things that'll come down the pike. Alina, maybe it's not unique. It feels unique. Our mission is so strong here. Our staff, our clinical staff and beyond, are so invested in helping our students and their families be well. And so in reflecting, the executive director, obviously the position comes with other parts that are equally important, but the mission side of why we're here and coming to work every day is never lost on any of us. The purpose of Alina Lodge is to help others and help people find sobriety and find recovery. And really, it's from that side, the mission side, it is just an incredible place. And using AZZLY as our EMR has been really helpful to bring efficiency and bring data to the evolving field of addiction treatment.
Yeah, excellent. It was great. I had a wonderful call with some of your staff earlier today, and we were talking about integration with Salesforce on the customer relationship management side. And exactly like you say, there's we want to be responsible for all your clinical and medical documentation, but there's quite a bit of work that has to be done from your business development team as you talk to individuals in needs and assess, is Alina Lodge the right place for them? Are our programs the right place for them? I've been at conferences and I've heard some pretty remarkable, talented individuals that have gone through your program, and because of your program at Alina, the residential program, they've maintained recovery. And so, you've been around for a long time, and I think that says a lot. What is it, 1957 Alina's been around?
It is. Yeah, we are one of the oldest programs in the country. Our founder, Mrs. Geraldine Delaney, was really a pioneer in addiction treatment. She was personal friends with Bill and Lois Wilson, the co-founders of Alcoholics Anonymous, and Al-Anon. Her family, her brother was sponsored by Bill W. So our history goes all the way back to the early parts of AA. And so, again, we bring such rich history and such experience in what helps individuals get sober. And then on the other side of that, when we look at some of the drawbacks, is that, because we're an old place, we had systems in place that, at the time might have been cutting edge, but, paper and pen is no longer how the world operates. And so with the help of AZZLY and Salesforce and some other things, we're really in modernizing a lot of how we do things here. So we're bringing our rich clinical history and then updating some of our systems to really bring us into continued relevance, I think, and just making the efficiency so much more part of our day-to-day work.
Great. Thank you, Bill, for sharing that. And, because many might not know Little Hill Foundation, it's a 501c3 not-for-profit organization, and that foundation governs Alina Lodge, which is the fabulous campus in that Blairstown, New Jersey area. And your program is very focused. It's long-term residential treatment. That's your sweet spot. That's what you do best. And the individuals that have come out of Alina, tend to have a better outcome. We
do, and we have the benefit of time. So going all the way back, Coletta, to when Mrs. Delaney started Alina Lodge, she was just always ahead of the curve. So all those decades back when people were kind of just drying out for a weekend, she wanted to do a couple of weeks. When people moved to a couple of weeks, she wanted to do a month. When people were doing a little bit longer, she was moving it to 6 and 8 weeks. And eventually, during her heyday, and she ran Alina for decades herself, we moved to a longer-term model, which was 3 to 8 months. And right now, most of our students are here, 9 to 12 months. And so we traditionally have understood, even before there was really the medical efficacy to why long-term treatment works. Mrs. Delaney, then the successors of her leadership and all the way up to our current staff, understand really the benefit of time from a healing perspective. And so we know addiction is a mind, body, spiritual disease. And there's so much evidence that just shows that people need time for their brain to heal. And active addiction and chronic active addiction can impact the cognitive functions in such drastic ways. So judgment and reasoning and thinking and decision-making, all those important parts of our brain that help people and guide people is so impaired. And depending on the nature of what people use, we're finding that it's taking, for some, depending on the nature of the substance, the better part of 6 months just before they start to really, their brain begins to heal in obvious ways, that there's, a steadiness to their thinking, a steadiness to their emotions. And so you'll see some of the emotional lability that is so typical of post-acute withdrawal that begins to even out. And then the beauty of long-term treatment is allowing people to work on parts of themselves that they really need to change in order to sustain sobriety. And so it's really a beautiful opportunity to have the healing happen and then have the practice of living sober life day after day for a period of time, which really gives them the ability to then have a lot of success on the outside. And so shorter-term programs just don't have that ability. And so there's a lot of wonderful programs, but it doesn't give the individual the time to heal and then the time to practice sober living. We love the model, and the benefit of it is clear. The efficacy is clear, and so our success rate is very high because of this ability to really have the time to work with the individuals and their families.
So, Bill, are you finding, since you've been doing this a while, are you seeing a change in the community, in circles that you're involved in, outside of those that work in the industry? Are you feeling a change?
I think it's mixed. I think for a long time it's slowly gotten better, but there are certainly pockets of people that still fall back on old ideas that addiction is about, some sort of moral ineptitude or kind of, really not understanding what addiction's really about and the impact that using has on the brain, and gets people to a place that they are unable to make choices. And so if you really don't understand addiction, it's hard to still understand why someone wouldn't stop. Or can't stop. But if I've been doing it for over 20 years now, so if you listen to people over the years and you really understand addiction and its impact on the brain, you understand that this is not, choices taken away long ago, and this isn't a moral issue, this isn't a religious issue, this isn't a bad person issue, this isn't an inner city issue, it's not beholden by race or gender or sex or anything. This is really a matter of impact on the brain and one's ability to make decisions and the way that obsession and craving happens. I think the opiate crisis has really put this into the forefront, and in some ways, the response by our government, by our communities, I think is helping with some of the stigma in some ways, because it is making it very public. And so the progression of one's disease, that typically, historically, if you look at alcohol, people can drink for most people for long periods of time in some sort of successful or semi-successful way, and then eventually get to the place where they are no longer able to function. But the progression of the drugs, in particular opiates and heroin, is bringing people to really bad places. And so the idea of substance use disorder, and the severity of one's progression is so quick now. that I think, while scary as heck and really tragic, it is bringing the stigma out a little bit. I think more and more communities are recognizing that this is not that old idea of moral failings.
That's great, yeah, and I would agree with that. That's what we're hearing. The more conferences that we attend, the more community meetings we attend. I agree with you. I think the good news, bad news is that the opioid epidemic that's affecting every single community out there has at least provided a certain level of education to staff at the state and local level in the political arena that seemed a little bit naive or not aware. And although there's been a lot of conversation regarding, especially down here in the Florida area, sober homes, but there wasn't a lot of discussion about, are we providing enough resources at the community level? Are there enough Alina lodges? Are there enough even for-profit treatment centers that can provide care to individuals in need? What's the statistic? They talk about 20 million individuals that suffer from addiction, and only 10% are getting treatment for a multitude of reasons. If even that can be made more plentiful, that there are better treatment centers or more treatment centers, and you hope that at the community level they are regulated. And at the accreditation level, I know you've got a CARF and Joint Commission, I believe, and the reason you do that, Bill, is why? So that you make sure you're meeting expected standards, right?
Right, and so I think last year I was at our national conference. I think only 8% of the programs nationally have both Joint Commission and CARF accreditation, of which we have both. And sure, we want the public to know that there's standards that are met here at Alina Lodge that mean something. And I think our national association has really moved the last couple of years to really bring the entire treatment industry up and put standards on it. And so Marvin Ventrell, who is currently the executive director of the National Association, has done a really nice job of, and I think all of the different constituents that are part of the organization have really done a nice job of looking at ourselves collectively and individually, and now there are really pretty strict guidelines and expectations for treatment programs and how you can run the programs. So it's been nice as well, because I think we've collectively done a disservice to a lot of communities and individuals, because if you're a family that's entering the treatment addiction field for the first time and trying to seek out a treatment for a loved one, it can be incredibly overwhelming. And so in some cases there's a saturation of treatment programs, and there's so much conflicting information as to what works and what doesn't. And so again, there's this kind of pro and con piece, because the opiate addiction has importantly really got the government to respond in some very favorable ways. But my fear is that we've also done an overall a lack of justice to the public, because a lot of money is being put into MAT, medically assisted treatment. And so while that is important on the continuum of care, I don't think enough focus has been put on treatment and longer-term treatment. And so I'm fearful that we've taken a bit of a Band-Aid approach to addiction by moving towards Suboxone being the answer, which is an opiate blocker and certainly helps people in early recovery with cravings. But there has not been nearly as much investment in more longer-term treatment. And the other fact is, Coletta, that while the opiate epidemic has brought focus on addiction and the need for treatment, alcohol is still by far a much more significant impact on individuals, families, and communities. So the opiate crisis, because it is, ends up in many more deaths much quicker because of how the nature of the progression when using opiates or heroin, I think to a large degree the public has forgotten that alcohol significantly outweighs opiate use and its damage for our families and our communities.
Hey, Bill, good comments, all good comments. And it was interesting, I was up in New York yesterday, and I was sitting in a room, probably about 30 individuals, not from this space, but many involved in healthcare and more business people. And I just asked the question, how many of you have been affected by an acquaintance or know of an acquaintance or a loved one or a family member that suffers from addiction, whether it be opioid or alcohol? Bill, 95% of the room, which I kind of knew the answer already, raised their hand. And so I strongly believe that education is a critical component. And I salute you. I saw that you even met up with the governor. What was that all about?
Yeah, so I had the pleasure, one of our staff members is a local mayor and was able to reach out and allowed me to participate in a conversation with the governor. It was largely his cabinet, and it was sort of a reflection of what his government, the state government, has been doing with regards to addiction treatment, and in particular the opioid crisis. So it was largely his cabinet with myself and one other program treatment representative, and it was interesting. Our governor's done a nice job, and his cabinet's done a nice job at addressing the opioid epidemic, as a lot of state governments have. But there's so much more that needs to get done. Anytime there's a loss of life, it's just a tragedy. And we know that people can get well. I mean, with treatment, people can really get well and move towards sobriety and recovery. So it was a unique opportunity. I did not speak long, but he did ask for some feedback on kind of, if you had a magic wand, what's one thing that he should know as governor. And I took the opportunity to really speak about the need for more insurance coverage, because you spoke earlier about treatment and listen, for many families the cost of long-term treatment is really prohibitive, and insurance companies barely cover 28 days, and we really just don't believe in the 28-day model. We don't think there's much efficacy there, and it has nothing to do, it's not a criticism of those programs in and of themselves. There's most people that go into this field are going in to help people. It's just a system that is set up to really not work very well, and it's a system that, when you take a step back, doesn't really understand the chronicity of addiction and what it really takes to allow people to have a really good opportunity to stay sober. And so, unfortunately, people, go in and out of 28-day programs without instead the investment in one long-term program and really doing the work that you need to do to be sober. So that was my reflection to the governor. I requested that he use some of his influence from a legislative perspective and some of his power as a governor to really move the insurance companies to provide more coverage, because I think that really, if we can really do that, then I think that we'll really see the numbers begin to come back up, and I think we'll see more and more people in long-term recovery.
Bill, thank you for those comments. Here at AZZLY, we're trying to help as many non-for-profits as we can with affordable pricing structure, and we do see a commitment, just like you've made, in these facilities that are been around for 50 years, been around for 75 years, been around for 25 years in their community, and they have made the investment in CARF. They've made the investment in the Joint Commission. They're making the investment in technology. And yes, you're absolutely right. Just like we discovered with you, it's some pretty old technology solutions there, and a lot was still on paper. yet you're making that investment, and it is an investment on your part to go through CARF, Joint Commission, embrace new technology, go through training and education of your staff to be more compliant, to write better notes, to prove medical necessity if you are going to submit to an insurance company. These are all rigid standards that are mandated now, and if you don't follow those standards, you don't get reimbursed, and if you don't get reimbursed, you can't serve more in a non-for-profit community. So it goes full circle. So I really salute you, and I agree with you, Marvin, at the NAATP. Fabulous organization. It is the ethics association for this industry. If you're not a member, you should look into it, especially if you're getting licensed. It would be the organization to join, because they even put you up on their website, and they encourage those that are looking for treatment, go on our website, look at our directory. If you see them as members of NATAB, we too are doing somewhat policing of who they are. Nobody's perfect. Unfortunately, there are individuals that may not do the right thing, but I agree with you. Coming from 25 years in financial securities, self-regulation has proven not to work at all times in any industry. So having a regulatory body that sets standards like all these have, and you have to live up to it or you don't, and if you don't, you shouldn't be in business. And you're right, it's too expensive treatment that, my goodness, no one can afford to waste $1 for a loved one. All those dollars do count, and they should go to the right facility. So I absolutely salute you, and I enjoy reading the tweets, seeing the social media, seeing what you all are doing. And the one thing I am incredibly impressed with is seeing your alumni stories, because they really are stories of hope. I mean, you just almost grin from ear to ear. We sure do when we read stories.
We do.
Like this.
We really do. We have over 2,000 alumni.
Wow.
Probably 600 or 700 that are actively connected to us. The generosity is incredible. Our development office raises over $1 million a year that we give out in financial aid to families as they move through our program and they need some help financially. And largely that comes from our alumni. Our alumni is our greatest base of generosity and giving. They're also been historically our greatest referral sources. Their stories, if you check us out, we asked our alum, in the fall, the winter time, we asked our alum to please really kind of publicly review us and kind of similar to what I was speaking about earlier, just trying to move us into a little bit more of relevancy for the nation to see us. We asked them to share their Google remarks, and we went from a very literally single-digit Google reviews to over 100 within a month, almost all of them 5-star, and they're testimonials. I mean, this is, getting sober is a difficult experience. If our listeners are listening and they've gone through active addiction and moved to sobriety, it will be one of the most difficult things that they have ever done. It is incredibly difficult. Being in treatment is hard. It's hard for the families. It's hard for the individuals. They're giving up their coping skills, something that at one time worked until it didn't. And they're learning how to look at themselves in very honest ways that can be very, very painful. There's a lot of trauma work that needs to be done, and there's a lot of healing. There's a lot of taking responsibility and ownership for choices that are made. And so the opportunity to do it in the long-term place is really important. And I want to kind of just circle back to what you were saying about Marvin, because I think it is unique. I think a couple of years ago, Marvin and the other leadership at our national association really put a stake in the ground and really said collectively and publicly that if you belong to our association, it's going to mean something. And certain places were kicked out, and certain people's membership was not renewed, and it was an opportunity for Marvin and other really strong programs to say that we're going to stand for something. And we're proud members of that association. And I think, as being one of the older places in the country, we have a lot to offer the rest of the industry to learn how to really help people get sober. And our clinical programming, in some ways, we've held on to some things that have worked historically that are kind of foundational parts of being sober. And then we've modernized our clinical approach, and we're continuing to do that, and bringing mindfulness in, and bringing some trauma treatment in, and our eating disorder program is really developing quite nicely. And so we're really been working very hard to really expand our clinical work with our students and their families.
That's awesome, Bill. So, Bill, thank you again for spending time with us. It's great for us to be able to learn more about the individual programs that are being served up there in the community, and especially what Little Hill Foundation, Haley House, and Alina Lodge, the great programs that you provide, and the wonderful success that you've had in the community, and gathering people from all over the world to help them in their recovery process. So again, thank you. And if there's interest out there in supporting a wonderful foundation, the Little Hill Foundation, this is just a great place to start. So again, Bill, thank you for your time today, and we look forward to following your progress.
Thank you, Colette. I appreciate your and your staff's work with us, and we'll talk soon.
Excellent. Thank you, Bill. Have a great day.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.